Hi, I'm Barbara Samuels and welcome back to another episode of Soul Stirring Astrology, where I give you my textured take on the world of astrology. Well, today it's the second in the water sign series around Saturn in the water signs. So today I'm looking at Saturn in Scorpio. So Scorpio is the house of Pluto, and it's the natural house in the zodiac, which is the 8th house. And so when we're dealing with the 8th house, what we're seeking to do is to go through a process of transformation. And by the time you arrive at an 8th house placement, what you've been asked to do is what you've learnt up until the 7th house, from 1 to 7, what you've learnt, and then how you can use that to transform and extract the wisdom. Therefore, you can bring it into your house of intimacy and sex, as well as, you know, death and taxes and other people's money and inheritance. What you've been asked to do is the lessons that you've learnt up until from 1 to 7. How do you then share those lessons? How do you share yourself intimately, emotionally, sexually with somebody else? So if we look at the polarity between the 2nd and the 8th house. 2nd house is all about, you know, what it is that you value, but it's more about what you value on a physical level, because 2nd house naturally is ruled by Taurus. The ruler of Taurus is Venus, and so where you've got the Venus, the Venusian and Taurian expression, it's about the tangible things, you know, how much money have I got in the bank, what makes me feel secure because of my possessions around me. And when you're dealing now with placements in the 8th house, it's not so much about the physical things. That's not to say that you won't, you know, inherit money. But it's more about what is the emotional value that's been attached in the 2nd house. Because we're dealing with the house of Pluto's house, it's about transformation, and it's about the transformation of your emotions and your identity, as well as, you know, this sexual expression. It's the house where you move through from the house of me, 1st house, 2nd house, through to the 7th, to the house of we. And the way that the house of we can be expressed is through the sexual orgasms, you know, through sex and intimacy, because through orgasms, a part of you dies in order to merge with somebody else. So Saturn now in the 8th house, it's a difficult position, because on the one hand, Saturn wants to preserve. So Saturn is, you know, the sign. It's the ruler that is really the carapace. It is about protection, even more so than the moon and Cancer, where you've got the crab. Saturn invites fear and retentiveness and rigidity. So with a Saturn in an 8th house and in the house of Scorpio, on the one hand, you're fearing intimacy, but in order to enter and entertain and be part of intimacy, to contribute towards intimacy, you've got to plunge into scorpionic waters. So if we think about the mythological story of Persephone, she was kidnapped, and she was kidnapped by Hades, taken to the underworld, and she was raped. And she lived in the underworld for 6 months of the year, and then came back to Earth for the other 6 months of the year. So she went in as a girl and emerged as a woman. And it's through this transformation, this death of your identity, that's being required here with Saturn in the 8th house. Because Saturn and the 8th house, particularly Scorpio, it's about crisis. Crisis, confrontation, transformation, and then self-mastery. Don't forget, Saturn is the mountain goat. So it's really proud about the steps it's taken to reach the top of the mountain to achieve status and kudos. But Saturn is, you know, it rules Capricorn, which is earth. It also rules air in the form of Aquarius. But if we think about the earth representation of Saturn, Saturn Earth in water, Scorpio, there's a diffusion. There's like, you know, quicksand. It's like mud, that because water obviously dilutes earth. So here, you're also being challenged or invited to think about this sense of emotional frigidity, sexual frigidity. Do you operate on a kind of quid pro quo basis? And what I mean by this is, we're looking at the emotional value that's attached in the 8th house. So are you somebody who may desire to be emotionally frivolous, emotionally generous, or are you somebody who's emotionally mean, or you operate on this kind of quid pro quo? You know, if you do something for me, then I'll kind of assess it and then I will do something back to you. And it's in this sort of exchange that reveals that you could be frigid sexually, emotionally, and intimately. Saturn here is about the protection of what is fragile to you. And Saturn here kind of reveals a sense of inadequacy. There's an inadequacy around sex and intimacy. You may have a fear about being controlled or dominated or overpowered. There could be some trauma around that. That you may have experienced, and as a result of that, Saturn acts as the barrier. As I said, it's like this emotional chastity belt around your heart as well as around your genitals. And so the way that you can mask this is, you know, you project it as being somebody who's really caring and loving and wants to transform everybody. 8th house is about transformation. It's about transformation on a kind of deep level, on the, you know, the unconscious, and helping other people to do this. So you're going to take care of all of their needs. You're going to be guiding them, you know, through their own dark nights of the soul. And the reason being is because when we're dealing with the 8th house, we're dealing with this sense of, we're seeking to master, you know, the mind as well as the psyche. And so the mind is about, you know, self-awareness, perception, you know, your relatedness to yourself and to the outside world. And the psyche really is about the exploration of the soul and the spirit. And so you're somebody who may do this through esoteric subjects like astrology, like tarot, like clairvoyance, like the study of psychology, depth psychology. You're really plunging in, and so therefore you're somebody who really takes care of other people's needs, and you celebrate that as you see them transforming. But it acts as a barrier. And don't forget, the 8th house is the invitation of sex and intimacy. So you could be attracting people into your world who want to be intimate with you, who want, you know, this closeness, because you're forging this through the emotional development that you're doing with them, but then you're blocking it. And so therefore it can act as a challenge when somebody desires you and you've been giving out in terms of, I'll take care of all of your needs. You might be flirting with them, but when it comes down to the physical act that moves you from me to we, you're boundaried. You're barriered because of this fear of not being enough, fear of the trauma. And so Saturn in Scorpio is really wanting you to develop the courage to confront that pain. As I said earlier, it's about crisis and confrontation. It's the courage to delve into, you know, to hold the mirror to yourself, the externalization that you do in terms of transforming other people. The call now is for you to do that to yourself. The 8th house is usually the invitation. You've got to do it through somebody else, and together you're both rebirth. But with Saturn here is the road to self-mastery. And the self-mastery here is, how do you become the emotional alchemist? It's through you becoming the alchemist that you're going to learn about the power of personal confrontation, the power of personal challenge, the power of delving deep into the scorpionic waters. And by doing so, you're then exploring your own mind, you're then exploring your own perceptions, you're exploring your psyche. And it's this elixir, you're going to come up with an elixir because you're going to use that to transform yourself, your life. So the barrier of Saturn in Scorpio, starts to come down. You lower the barriers, and by doing so, the transformation takes place within yourself. And then you can do that, continue to do that, but you're doing it from a place of authenticity, more so than this place of projection, because the projection acts as a fear, it acts as a barrier. So, you know, those of you who have Saturn in the 8th house, it's a very delicate and difficult position, because you're being called to plunge into Pluto's underworld, and at the same time you're being required through Saturn to hold on to what you know, even though it may hurt you. And it's a reflection actually of what's coming up in 2020, when the conjunction between Saturn and Pluto takes place in the 2nd week of January. We're seeing it played out with this placement of Saturn in Scorpio. Principles are very similar. Saturn wants to hold on as the ultimate authority, and then Pluto is saying, no, it's time for transformation. And the route for you with Saturn in Scorpio is that you must become the master transformer. You've got to transform this, and then that's going to give you the kudos on the power that you're looking for. Then you can go off and you can co-create, you can procreate, and you can relate to other people in a really natural, free-flowing way. There's going to be an ease that comes with this position of Saturn in Scorpio, but you do have quite a bit of a challenge to navigate. So that's it, beautiful people. If you have Saturn in Scorpio, put the comments in the comment box. I'd love to hear how you work with this Saturn placement. It's a hard one. It's a hard one. So feel free to share this episode with anybody in your network. Comments in the comment box below. You can like and subscribe to my channel. And if you'd love a personal reading with me, get in touch by bringingsamuels@googlemail.com. Take care, and I will see you on the next episode, which will be the last in the Saturn series now, because it will be Saturn in Pisces. So take care, stay well, and I'll see you soon. Bye.